I was watching a friend try to explain neural networks to his 14-year-old last summer. He pulled up a diagram: nodes, edges, activation functions, Greek letters, and within about 90 seconds, the kid's eyes had gone completely flat. My friend kept going, talked about weight matrices, gradient descent, loss landscapes. The kid nodded politely, the way you nod when someone is describing their dream from last night. I remember thinking, this is the most important technology of the decade, maybe the century, and the standard explanation is essentially designed to make people stop listening. So I want to try something different. I want to explain neural networks with monkeys and bananas. And I want to do it in a way where, by the end, you'll actually understand what is happening inside these systems. Not metaphorically, not vaguely, but structurally. The story of neural networks starts in 1943, when two researchers, Warren McCulloch, a neurophysiologist, and Walter Pitts, a logician, published a paper describing the first computational model of a neuron. Their idea was deceptively simple. A neuron receives inputs. If those inputs exceed a certain threshold, it fires. If they don't, it stays quiet, on or off. Imagine a monkey sitting in a room. This monkey has one job: decide whether a piece of fruit is a banana. Other monkeys hand it clues: the color of the fruit, the shape, the smell. Each clue comes with a certain weight, a measure of how much this particular monkey trusts that particular clue. If the combined weight of all the clues crosses a threshold, the monkey raises its hand and says, "Banana." If not, it stays still. That's a neuron. A single unit that takes weighted inputs, runs them through a threshold, what the technical literature calls an activation function, and either fires or doesn't. In 1958, a psychologist named Frank Rosenblatt built on McCulloch and Pitts's work and created something called the perceptron. It was a single-layer neural network, one layer of these decision-making monkeys, and it could learn. You'd show it data, it would make a guess, and if the guess was wrong, it would adjust its weights, adjust which clues it trusted more or less, and try again. The press lost its mind. The New York Times reported that the Navy had revealed the embryo of an electronic computer that it expects will be able to walk, talk, see, write, reproduce itself, and be conscious of its own existence. The New Yorker called it the first serious rival to a human brain ever devised. This was 1958. A single layer of artificial neurons, and the newspaper of record was predicting machine consciousness. A single monkey, a single perceptron, can solve certain kinds of problems beautifully. If you can draw a straight line separating bananas from not bananas based on some set of features, one monkey handles it. But some problems cannot be divided by a straight line. The classic example is the XOR problem, exclusive OR. Imagine you have two features, and the correct answer is yes only when exactly one of the two features is present. Not both, not neither. You cannot draw a single straight line to separate those cases. A single perceptron fails completely. In 1969, a researcher named Marvin Minsky, who, as a small but extraordinary footnote, had attended the same high school as Frank Rosenblatt, 1 year apart, published a book with Seymour Papert called Perceptrons. The book proved, rigorously, that single-layer perceptrons could not solve the XOR problem. That's mathematically true. But Minsky and Papert went further. They conjectured, mistakenly as it turned out, that similar limitations would apply to multi-layer perceptrons, that stacking layers of these neurons wouldn't help. The book didn't merely slow down neural network research. It nearly killed it. DARPA, the primary funder of artificial intelligence research in the United States, redirected its resources almost entirely toward symbolic AI, expert systems, logic programming, knowledge representation. Academic departments stopped hiring neural network researchers. Conference papers on the topic were rejected. Graduate students were actively discouraged from pursuing neural network dissertations. The field entered what is now called the first AI winter, lasting roughly from 1969 to 1982. At a conference in 2006, a researcher named Terry Sanowski confronted Minsky directly, asking him if he were the devil for killing neural network research. Eventually, an angry Minsky shouted back, "Yes, I am." Two childhood acquaintances from the same high school. One built the thing. The other wrote the book that buried it. A 13-year winter followed. What pulls the field out of that winter is the realization that Minsky and Papert's conjecture was wrong. You can solve the XOR problem, and vastly harder problems, by adding layers. Go back to the monkeys. Instead of one monkey making the banana decision, imagine three groups. The first group looks at the raw data, pixel values in an image, frequencies in a sound wave, words in a sentence. They are the input layer. Each passes its assessment forward to a second group, the hidden layer, where monkeys receive assessments from multiple first-layer monkeys, weight those assessments, run them through their own thresholds, and pass new assessments forward. At the end sits an output monkey, or a small group of output monkeys who make the final call. Banana or not banana, cat or dog, spam or not spam. Those middle monkeys aren't looking at the raw clues anymore. They're looking at combinations of clues, patterns of patterns. A first-layer monkey might notice the fruit is yellow. Another might notice it's curved. A hidden layer monkey combines those signals and recognizes something neither individual monkey could. The combination of yellow and curved, weighted appropriately, is strongly associated with banana. Stack enough hidden layers and you get what we now call a deep neural network. The word deep doesn't refer to anything profound. It refers to depth, more layers, more groups of monkeys passing assessments to each other before a final answer is produced. The monkeys start out essentially random. Their initial weights, how much they trust each input, are arbitrary. The first time you show a deep network an image of a banana, it might confidently declare it to be a fire truck. The answer to how it learns was described in 1974 by Paul Werbos, though almost nobody noticed at the time. It was rediscovered and popularized in the landmark 1986 paper by David Rumelhart, Geoffrey Hinton, and Ronald Williams, titled Learning Representations by Backpropagating Errors. The algorithm is called backpropagation. The network makes a prediction. That prediction is compared to the correct answer. The difference, the error, is calculated. Then that error is traced backward through the entire network, layer by layer, all the way to the input. Each monkey in each layer gets a report. Here is how much your particular weight contributed to the final error. Adjust accordingly. The output monkey says, fire truck. The trainer says, wrong, that's a banana. The output monkey looks back at the hidden layer monkeys who fed it information and says, you told me to lean heavily toward fire truck. Lower your confidence in that signal. Those middle monkeys, in turn, look back at the input layer monkeys and make similar adjustments. The blame propagates backward through the entire chain. Do this thousands of times with thousands of examples, and the weights slowly converge on values that produce correct answers more often than not. The first true practical application came in 1989, when Jan LeCun applied backpropagation at Bell Labs to recognize handwritten digits. Zip codes on envelopes. The post office used it. For the next 2 decades, neural networks improved steadily, but not spectacularly. Then, in 2012, Alex Krzyzewski and Ilya Sutskever, working with Geoffrey Hinton at the University of Toronto, entered the ImageNet Large-Scale Visual Recognition Challenge with a deep convolutional neural network called AlexNet. It had 5 convolutional layers, 3 fully connected layers, and approximately 60 million parameters. It won the competition so decisively that it essentially launched the modern deep learning era. The final paragraph of the AlexNet paper was nearly prophetic. The authors noted that they did not use any unsupervised pre-training, even though we expect it will help, and observed that their results have improved as we have made our network larger. and that they still have many orders of magnitude to go in order to match the inferotemporal pathway of the human visual system. They were right. The first version of GPT had 117 million parameters. GPT-2, released in February 2019, had 1.5 billion. GPT 3.5 reached approximately 175 billion. GPT-4 is widely reported to be a mixture of experts model with around 1.8 trillion total parameters, using 16 experts of roughly 111 billion each. 60 million to 1.8 trillion in roughly 12 years, a trajectory the AlexNet authors saw coming from the end of their own paper. 1.8 trillion parameters sounds enormous until you set it next to the system it was originally inspired by. The human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons. Each neuron has, on average, 7,000 synaptic connections to other neurons. An adult human brain operates with somewhere between 100 trillion and 500 trillion synapses. A 3-year-old child has approximately 1 quadrillion. GPT-4's 1.8 trillion parameters represent, on a simple comparison, roughly 1% of the complexity of the human brain. And that comparison is generous, because biological neurons aren't just switches. They're adaptive, flexible, and chemically rich in ways that artificial neurons are not. Going from 8 billion to 70 billion parameters in a model yields a massive leap in capability. Going from 400 billion to 1.8 trivial yields a noticeable improvement, but it costs exponentially more money, requires vastly more energy, and introduces massive engineering challenges. The returns are diminishing, and the organizations building these models know it better than anyone. And this is where it connects to you, specifically. Every time you ask a voice assistant a question, every time your phone recognizes your face, every time an email gets sorted into spam, every time a translation appears on your screen, that is layers of monkeys passing weighted assessments to each other through a structure that was nearly abandoned in 1969 because 2 researchers at MIT wrote a book proving the limitations of a single-layer version of the idea. The technology running inside your phone survived a 13-year winter, 2 rounds of near-total defunding, a generation of researchers being told to study something else, and a conjecture that turned out to be wrong. These systems are now making decisions that affect your credit score, your medical diagnoses, your job applications, and the information you see every day. The neural network market was valued at $34.1 billion in 2024. It's projected to reach $385.3 billion by 2033, growing at a compound annual rate of 31.4%. North America accounts for 33.5% of that revenue. The banking, financial services, and insurance sector alone represents 28% of total market share. OpenAI's revenue jumped from $5.5 billion in December 2024 to $10 billion in June 2025. Enterprise generative AI spending is rising 30% in 2025 as mid-market firms adopt managed platforms. In March 2025, Microsoft collaborated with Inait to create AI models that emulate mammalian brain reasoning. Red Hat purchased Neural Magic to add optimized inference libraries to its hybrid cloud suite. The cloud deployment segment represented approximately 65% of the neural network market share in 2025. In October 2024, the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded jointly to John Hopfield and Geoffrey Hinton for foundational discoveries and inventions that enable machine learning with artificial neural networks. Ellen Moons, chair of the Nobel Committee for Physics, stated, "The laureate's work has already been of the greatest benefit. In physics, we use artificial neural networks in a vast range of areas, such as developing new materials with specific properties." When reached by the Academy, Hinton said he was flabbergasted. He added, "I had no idea this would happen. I'm very surprised. This is the same Geoffrey Hinton who, in 1983 through 85, used tools from statistical physics to create the Boltzmann machine. The same Hinton who co-authored the 1986 backpropagation paper. The same Hinton who co-supervised AlexNet. The same Hinton who received the 2018 Turing Award alongside Yoshua Bengio and Jan LeCun. He's also the same Hinton who resigned from Google in 2023, citing concerns about potential risks in artificial intelligence technology, who told the press after receiving the Nobel that AI will be like the Industrial Revolution, but instead of our physical capabilities, it's going to exceed our intellectual capabilities, who added that he still worries the consequences of his work might be systems that are more intelligent than us that might eventually take control. The person most responsible for making these monkeys work is also the person most worried about what happens when there are too many of them and not enough oversight. A child doesn't need a million images of cats to recognize a cat. A few encounters, combined with senses, context, memory, and an understanding of what cat means within a broader world, are enough. Artificial neural networks are data hungry. They need massive data sets, sometimes millions of examples, just to achieve basic accuracy on a specific task. They have no context. They have no understanding. They have weights. Donald Hebb, back in 1949, articulated a learning hypothesis often summarized as cells that fire together, wire together. Neural pathways in biological brains are strengthened each time they're used. That principle inspired artificial neural networks, but the inspiration is exactly that, an inspiration, not a replication. The gap between a child recognizing a banana after 3 encounters and a neural network requiring tens of thousands of labeled banana images is not a gap that scales away. It's a gap of kind, not degree. There are serious researchers who believe that enough scale, enough parameters, enough data, enough compute will eventually close that gap. There are equally serious researchers who believe that no amount of scaling produces genuine understanding, that neural networks are sophisticated pattern matchers operating in a fundamentally different register than biological cognition. Both camps can point to evidence. The scaling camp points to GPT-4 scoring in the 90th percentile on the bar exam. The understanding camp points to those same models confidently generating plausible-sounding nonsense about topics they have no mechanism to verify. What we do know, with considerable precision, is what these systems are. Layers of weighted nodes, trained through backpropagation, adjusting their parameters to minimize the difference between their predictions and the correct answers in their training data. Monkeys passing banana assessments through a chain, getting better through repetition, with no monkey in the chain understanding what a banana is. My friend's 14-year-old eventually did learn what a neural network was. Not from the diagram with the Greek letters. From a conversation about a week later where I described monkeys in groups, passing fruit assessments to each other, adjusting who they trusted based on whether the final monkey got the answer right, tracing the blame backward when it got the answer wrong. The kid got it in about 4 minutes. Then he asked a question that I think about a lot. So, it doesn't actually know anything? There's no better answer than the one the architecture itself provides. It has weights. Those weights were adjusted billions of times. The adjustments were based on whether the output matched the training data. Whether that constitutes knowing is a question the monkeys themselves will never be able to answer.